Hey there, I'm Jerry, and this is Tales of the Deathless, where you guys will be joining me on my campaign playing Dungeons and Dragons. My roommate is a dungeon master, and he recently just started a new campaign. He asked me if I wanted to play, and I figured why not. I like fantasy role playing. I figured it'd be fun to create my own character in this world he had. My character, I went ahead and chose from a homebrew race called Soulbound. Think Full Metal Alchemist, who had his soul bound to a suit of armor by his brother. With that in mind, I also chose Artorias from Dark Souls to be ahead in what my character would look like. And I mean, you can guess why he's kind of a badass. Um, for his name, I chose Ambrosius, which means immortal or divine. And being that he's a cursed soul and armor that isn't ravished by time, I figured it would be a fitting name. I made him 500 years old, and since he was cursed, he doesn't really remember any of his life from before because being soulbound, their memories don't function the same as it used to. Instead, they kind of overlay one another, and eventually, the older memories get wiped out. So by the time I'm in this campaign, I no longer remember my old life, but now all I know is that I'm looking for a worthy opponent and hopefully for one day to die. Um, as a class, I chose to be a barbarian because, what would be more intimidating than this suit of armor carrying a heavy sword, doing crazy amount of damage, and be able to take a crazy amount of damage. And for my first campaign, it worked. For our first session, I was really up front, but I ran into issues where I was either the only one up front and I was getting swarmed, or everyone else was doing damage from way back, and I had to spend most of my turn running up forward. So I decided to multi-class as a warlock to help with range and crowd control. Now, the campaign I'm playing is called Windwalker. It takes place in an island called Zalenta, and the story is going to be more Asian culture based and Asian mythology, with a little bit D&D thrown in there. And since I started a couple sessions late, my DM had to figure out a good way for me to meet my companions. And the way he had planned it was my companions were in the town inside of the Heron clan. They were at a bar enjoying a couple drinks, trying to plan their next move. But while that was going on, the Spider Clan was robbing a museum, and they had entered to the lowest level of the basement and of the museum, and they had stumbled upon a pedestal with a couple of artifacts from another land, and chose to inspect it. And they noticed this giant set of armor, it was 7 feet tall, with a giant claymore nearly the same size in its hands. And these two ninjas moved in closer to inspect it, and as one of them stepped inside of the pedestal, they unknowingly broke the seal which had held the armor dormant. And from his long slumber, Ambrosius began to move as if stiff limbs, slowly and jerky. And due to this, the Spider Clan ninjas, they jumped back and began to pull out their swords and look at one another in fear. Ambrosius, seeing this, began to lift his sword and prepare for combat, asking them, "Can you kill a deathless?" And then he proceeds to murder them, basically. Leaving the museum, he causes a lot of attention. This eerie armor just dragging his giant sword behind him, walking down the village, and everyone's just running away from him. And then he sees the bar that's got lights in, and people are standing outside and at the windows, just staring out at him. And he begins to walk towards it, and as soon as he gets there, he starts to hear people scrambling, just battering stuff in front of the door, just so that he to keep him from getting inside. And then all it took was one giant knock, and he pushes everything out of the way from how strong he is. And he pushes the door open and walks in, and everyone just stares at him. And all my companions are in the very corner. Not yet my companions, but scaredly looking at me. I go ahead and walk over to the bartender and ask for a drink, and almost by second nature, I take the drink, but it does nothing but just roll down the armor and leak onto the floor. Uh, at this point, you know, everyone's run out of the bar. You know, my team, not yet my team, are in the corner. Shyly inspecting me and seeing if I pose them a danger. And then next, we have Heron Clan soldiers run through, and they are inspecting, the bar because there was this giant, commotion. Looking at me, then they look at my companions who were in earlier trouble with them, and they decide that I'm more of a danger to them, so they decide to go ahead and deal with my companions. And story short, we end up teaming up because I killed one of them and the other guy ran away, and then we had to run away from town. And so we ended up fleeing over to the Spider Clan, and that is where we will pick up next time. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like. If you would like to receive notifications on when the next video comes out, you can go ahead and subscribe. I'm Jerry, and this was Tales of the Deathless. Thanks for tuning in.